much once again. Like I was just mentioning to the people who had joined us earlier, today we'll be talking about understanding dyslexia, reading and comprehension difficulties with none other than our very own speaker, Madam Geeta Gopi, with whom I am pretty sure most of you must have attended her past sessions because we keep receiving amazing feedback for her sessions. Moving on, before I talk more about her, let me tell you a little bit about Ability. For us, as an organization, all carers of children with special needs, that is, special educators, therapists, and of course, parents, you all are at the center of our universe. Every child wants to thrive, and we believe that every child should be given the opportunity to thrive. Our mission is hence to make things easier for you all because you all are at the center of our universe, right? And when we say easier, we mean making it more accessible, making it more affordable, and of course, making it more effective for you all. And one way we have been able to do this is through technology. But while we understand that technology could help a lot, we also do understand that technology alone is insufficient. Without the caregivers, technology cannot bring about a significant difference. It is just like any other support system, such as there are other support systems required, community, resources, because no one would have to do this alone. No one should have to do this alone, right? So that's what we bring to you. From Ability, we bring to you community and other resources to enable the best chance of discovering your child's true potential. And while talking about resources, one way we make our resources reach to you is via YouTube. Our YouTube channel has more than hundreds of videos which can be useful for anyone who's interested in the sphere of special education or is interested to help a child with special needs. So go check it out if you haven't. The link to subscribe to our YouTube channel is being shared in the chat box right now. So you can also go to YouTube and search for EBLITY and subscribe to our channel to stay updated about all our videos. Apart from that, you can also follow us on Facebook. Thousands of people are already following us. And by following us on Facebook, you can stay updated about all the upcoming events that we are planning to organize or will be organizing in future so that you never miss an opportunity to learn. And we have been doing webinars. Most of you must have attended our webinars already. I suppose this webinar is no different. This is a foundational knowledge building webinar for dyslexia. Apart from that, we have recently launched workshops. The setting of workshop is a little different in the sense it will be organized in a smaller group setting so that it can facilitate more interaction, more direct interaction with the expert so that you can address your challenges or the problems that you are facing better. So if you haven't registered for any of the Ability workshops, do try it. We would also be sharing link for the ongoing workshop series in the chat box shortly. Now, coming to today's topic for the day, like I already mentioned, this is the fifth webinar from the ongoing series on specific learning disorders. We did talk about introduction, identification, how to plan instructions, what can be the support systems. And now we will be talking about one of the common SLDs, that is dyslexia. I am pretty sure most of you must have, the ones who are coming from India, must have watched the movie Tare Zameen Par. Maybe this could explain it that could explain it much better. So coming to the speaker of the day, most of you must already know her. She's the Director of Professional Development and Programs at the Sashaktikaran Trust with over 30 years of experience, worked in international schools, done intensive work in curriculum development and adaptations, behavior management, coordinating and promoting best educational practices using UDL principles among staff and parents. She has also launched her Early Academic Series, which is a teacher's kit for teaching early English language skills and basic mathematics skills on universal design of learning. And apart from that, she's currently a research scholar pursuing her PhD with so much of dedication and hard work. So, really, really glad to have you here with us, Geeta ji. And without further ado, I would request you to take over.
Thank you, Swati, and the Ability platform. Once again, it's a pleasure to be here amongst your wonderful participants and the reach that you have. So, without further ado, I think I'll go into uh, the topic for the day. But before we get into what we're going to do for today, I'd like to do a quick recap of what we did last time. So, in the last webinar, we talked about the various learning supports that children with SLD need. We talked about the behavioral aspects, the emotional aspects, the communication aspect. So it was not just about the academics, but also the entire gamut of social, psychosocial aspects that we have to uh, address in the case of a child with SLD. We also discussed about the different kinds of accommodations and modifications that we may have to make in the behavioral area or the general language use area, in the area of academics, in the area of assessment and grading, and in the area of classroom environment, the physical environment in the classroom. So, having done all this, we've given you a fair grounding, a good foundational base on SLD and how we need to address the issues that are associated with SLD. So now we are today, for today, we are focusing a bit more, narrowing our focus on dyslexia, which is one of the most commonly seen SLD issues, which are which are the reading difficulties that children encounter. So today we are going to discuss about what are some of the commonly related reading difficulties seen in children with SLD. And then when we are planning instruction, we have to think of three main things. One is learning to read, the other is reading fluency, and the third is reading to learn. So we are going to look at each of these and what these are and how to go about doing it. Also, reading is incomplete without comprehension. So we'll be touching upon what comprehension is and what are the different kinds and what is involved in planning for comprehension activities in your instruction program. So let's do a understand what is dyslexia. So it is a learning disorder that makes it very hard for children to read. So they don't read as naturally or with ease as other children of their age group do. So dyslexia really makes it the information processing inside their neurodevelopmental system makes it very difficult for them to read in a smooth and efficient manner. And research studies have shown that about 5 to 10% of people show varying signs of reading challenges. Could range from very mild to very severe. Children with dyslexia don't really outgrow it naturally. They don't just come out of it automatically, with time. But what we do know is we can plan intervention or instruction in such a way, use certain kind of teaching strategies, teaching activities that can help people who have these reading difficulties to improve their reading skills and manage the challenges that they face in this area. So, before we get into reading, we need to know that there are different skills and processes that are necessary or that underlying the reading area. So, difficulties in reading are usually because children have deficiencies or they have glitches in the skills and
Hi, Geeta
processes.
ji. Sorry to interrupt you again. Maybe you could try speaking a little louder or maybe removing your headphones because I believe some of our participants are facing some difficulty in hearing you.
Okay, okay, no issues. Okay. Can I just start with this, restart with this slide? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Skills and processes for reading. Difficulties in reading usually may occur because of the deficiencies or the glitches which are present in the processes that contribute to development of reading. And some of these skills are phonemic awareness, the ability to decode words. So many of these skills are, either deficient or children don't develop these as their peer groups do, which is why they have reading difficulties. So let's just go through this. Difficulties in phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness means the ability to recognize the different kinds of sounds that are present in words. So, an awareness of the beginnings of words or the endings of words and so on. That is known as phonemic awareness. So, difficulties in phonemic awareness, difficulties with decoding words. Decoding words means the ability to match the letters to the sounds. So, ability to do letter sound matching. So, all these issues with phonological processing uh, adds up to difficulties in reading, and it affects the reading fluency. So, when reading fluency is affected, it doesn't just affect the process of reading, it affects the understanding of the text, that is comprehension. It also has a spilling over effect in that children, it affects their spelling skills, their writing skills, and to some extent it also affects their math skills. That is because in math also we need to read, right? We need to read numbers, we need to write numbers, there are number names involved, there is language involved when it comes to word problems. So in math also there's a considerable amount of reading that goes on. So therefore, when children have dyslexia, they may be better in math, but there will still be some kind of a spilling effect in their math area as well. So when we are taking them up for intervention, we need to remember all this and plan accordingly. And why do we really need to address reading difficulties? Because first we did say that reading affects, being able to read and being able to understand is a very key skill that is necessary for learning, and especially academic learning in schools. And when they struggle with reading, it is not just the academic part that is affected, but also emotions and behavior, which is affected. So the psychosocial aspects are all affected. And generally, we find that children who have difficulties in reading, they may try to avoid the task of reading. They may get very anxious or frustrated when they don't, when they have to read, especially when they have to read aloud or read aloud in front of a class. Or if they have mastered some bit of reading, they get fatigued or exhausted very easily, even with a small amount of reading, because they do not read with ease. They read with a lot of effort. So it's a very effortful reading that takes place in these children. And therefore, they have concurrent issues that psychosocial issues relating to reading. So whenever we approach the task of reading, then we find there are a lot of emotional or behavioral acts which are attached to these. It also affects everyday skills and activities. Because of all these, because of their not being able to perform with ease on on a skill on par with their peers, even social interaction gets affected. Sometimes children get very withdrawn, or sometimes they act up in class so that they can be punished, or so they can get out of the difficult task of reading. So social interaction with the peers, with the teachers, with the parents do get affected. Uh, Memory is also another factor which gets affected, because when we read, what we happens is when we read and reread, that's how a lot of our learning happens, because a good part of our learning happens with reading and repetitive reading. So it stays in our memory. So when these children refuse to read, or they get out of reading, or they find reading very difficult, so the number of repetitiveness really comes down, which means their learning gets affected, memory of concepts learned get affected, etc. It also affects dealing stress related issues. So when there is a difficult situation, because this has a spilling over effect. So when reading is a very difficult task, they would have learned certain behaviors or ways of getting out of it. This can also spill over into other things in life. So whenever they encounter anything difficult, there'll be a avoidance tendency. So that kind of a pattern develops in these children. So it has a wide ranging impact. So what we really need to do in this situation is, as soon as you find that the child has difficulties with reading, that is, as soon as you get an indication, identify it early and act early as possible. So if you realize this when the child is in preschool, so be it. Act right there. It doesn't matter whether the child is diagnosed with SLD or not, but if the child has reading problems or is finding it difficult with the reading skills, definitely get help and try to get the child back on track or to minimize the difficulty levels. So acting is early is very important, because a lot of times when parents come to us, when we take a case history, we realize that the child has had these problems even in the younger classes. But parents or teachers, they've always thought, okay, they will grow out of it, they will learn with time. Now that doesn't happen. If they have these learning difficulties, you definitely need to provide intervention and targeted instruction for them to learn to cope with it and to get back onto the track and learn these skills related to reading. So identifying early and acting early is very, very important. Now, what are some of the common reading difficulties that we see in the classroom? One of the earliest things that we see is not able to remember letter shapes and their sounds, the sounds that relate to the letters. Having difficulty in learning and singing rhymes. Now, this is a very clear indicator that there may be a risk factor for reading disorder, because most of the young children, even if they can't read or write, they all learn and sing rhymes and action songs in preschool very easily. Children with possible reading difficulties that may shape up later on usually do show, some of them do show these signs of finding it difficult to learn and sing rhymes. Difficulty listening to and following multi-step directions. So if there are one or two or three step directions, they may get only a part of it and they may not miss out on the rest of it. So difficulty following multi-step directions. Confusion between letters or words which are very similar looking or similar sounding. So again, here we talk about reversals, like sometimes the word saw, SAW, can be mistakenly read as was, WAS, or even similar sounding letters, like P and B. When you look, they both are, the way you're pronouncing it is visually it is very similar. It's only auditorily, when you listen to it, that it is different. So again, they may have difficulty with this. Unable to read and comprehend simultaneously. So this is like two processes are happening. You have to read the words as well as understand or process the information that you're reading. And usually with most of us, we tend to do this hand in hand. But children who have dyslexia, particularly, they have difficulty in handling both the processes concurrently or in a simultaneous manner. So therefore, what happens is, after they've read, when you start asking questions based on the material, they have difficulty in answering those questions, because when they were reading, they haven't really comprehended or processed that information. Another common factor is making errors in reading. So when they are reading, they may make errors, and a lot of times they don't even realize they've made those errors. So make reading, probably they'll just look at the beginning part of the word and almost guess the word. So and they will go on reading that this and not realize that that word doesn't make sense within the context of that sentence. So making errors in reading. Also reading fluency, like the speed and accuracy of reading. So while some of them may read very fast, appear to read fast, but with lots of errors. Some of them may read very slowly, and still make errors. Also, sometimes they may read correctly, but they may be reading at a very very slow pace, which again slows them down. So many of these kinds of reading difficulties are commonly seen in the classroom. So when we are talking about reading intervention, the early part of schooling, in the primary or the elementary schooling years, we are actually talking about teaching the child to learn how to read. So learning to read is an important skill, especially in the primary elementary classes. So the instruction, if you are getting children at that stage, definitely they should learn how to read. If you see a word, how do we go about reading that word? That is very very important. So the focus of primary curriculum is learning to read, and here in these years the instruction needs to focus on building up skills in certain key areas, and some of these key areas are phonological and phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness means a wide umbrella of skills which are related to sounds, basically under words and sounds. So understanding the beginning part of sound, the beginning sounds in words, the ending sounds, the concept of rhyming, all these come under this wide big umbrella of phonological awareness. So it's basically having a kind of sound awareness by listening to it. Phonemic awareness also has to do with listening, but phonemic awareness is one part, one sub part of the wide umbrella of phonological awareness. So when it comes to phonemic awareness, basically they are looking at again hearing, but we are looking at things like you know uh, how to blend sounds, how to when you see certain sounds, when you see a word, how to put those sounds together and read the word, or when you're how to pull those sounds apart or even manipulate the sounds. Manipulate means, for example, if you have a word like cat, how can you take the k sound, and instead of the k, if you put b there, how do you read that word? Or and you can manipulate in different ways. You can manipulate the beginning sounds, you can manipulate the middle sounds, you can even manipulate the final sounds. So this kind of phonemic manipulation, all this contribute to phonemic awareness. So this is a very very important skill which underlies the development of reading. The next one, when we come to the more academic side of it, is phonics and sight word recognition. This is particularly true in the case of non phonetic languages like English. When you're teaching reading in English, English is not strictly a phonetic language. There are many words which can be phonetic, that is, they can be sounded out, and then there are words that the spelling have no bearing to the way it is pronounced. So so the phonetics cannot be applied, the phonic rules cannot be applied to those words. So therefore, when you're teaching reading in English, you need to do a combination of the phonics, which is the letter sound association or letter combinations to the sound association, as well as the whole words, the sight word approach. So a combination of these two help in teaching reading in English. When it comes to other languages, particularly I can say in many of the Indian languages, the regional or the vernacular languages, most of our Indian languages are very phonetic. But what the difficulties we see in children when it comes to the vernacular languages are that the number of alphabets or the number of symbols that relate to different sound combinations are different. And so, for example, if the vowel comes at the beginning of a word, it's written in a particular way. But if that same vowel comes in the middle of a word or following a consonant, it's written in a different way. So here, that is where in such languages, the number of symbols that are associated with the sounds increase, and that's where the difficulty is seen. Whereas in English, you see more difficulties in the area of, the confusion between the phonics and the phonetic rules as well as sight words. Now, with these two, once you start with the reading process, another thing that we need to work on is reading fluency. Reading fluency is being able to read at an even pace with least amount of errors. So, fluency basically refers to speed and accuracy. So, not read too fast or not read too slow, but read at an even pace, but with as few errors as possible. So, again, we have one, while we start with learning to read, reading fluency is at its initial stages, and we need to work on this area. Now, reading by itself doesn't make any sense if you do not understand what is being read. So, comprehension is a very, very important skill to teach. Along with reading, comprehension has also to be taught. So, it is not appropriate to assume that children who can read will comprehend automatically. They do not. And especially with children with SLD, because they have difficulty processing the information while they are reading, and many of them are strugglers when it comes to reading. So, when they're struggling with the decoding of the words itself, comprehension doesn't happen simultaneously. So, again, comprehension exercises have to be targetedly taught. The other thing is vocabulary. Again, all this is linked to the ability to read, to be able to read and comprehend. The lesser they read, the lesser they comprehend, the lesser the vocabulary, the word, uh, the knowledge of words and the meanings of words that they have, or you know, uh, a kind of a mental dictionary of words that is affected because reading and comprehension are affected, so therefore the vocabulary is also affected. And we have to work on all these areas when we are teaching, right from the younger classes itself, when children are still learning how to read. When we complete the primary or the elementary classes, and when we go on to the higher level classes, by then it is assumed that all children or most children know how to read. So then, by then you find in all over the world, the curriculum actually gets harder. There's more content matter in the subject areas, in the different subject areas, because it is assumed that the children have the ability to read and comprehend by that age. So therefore, they can read and then learn the concepts that is given in the text matter. But again, here you have to understand that children with SLD, they may not have learned how to read fully well in the primary or elementary. They will still be learning how to read. So reading to learn becomes a very, very difficult proposition for them. So again, when you're moving into, there is quite an overlap with SLD kids. Sometimes with learning to read, you have to introduce reading to learn as well. So when there's this overlap, again, some of the key areas when you're reading to learn is working extensively on reading fluency. So they may have acquired some bit of reading, but that fluency, the speed and accuracy has to be worked on. And even though it was started in the early classes, it has to be worked on more during the higher classes. Reading comprehension is a big thing, because from the younger classes, from simple letter or word or simple sentence level, it goes into passages or paragraphs or higher level comprehension. So the amount of reading is increased, the amount of vocabulary increases concurrently. Therefore, the level of comprehension also is increased in the higher classes. So all these have to be taught in a graduated manner. So when you're teaching reading skills, when you start from the basic skills, start with comprehension, all these simultaneously, right from the when you start with letters or words, then move to words, then move to sentences, and then move to paragraphs, or then finally into stories or bigger chapters. All these skills have to be targetedly planned for and taught. A little bit about the comprehension part of it. It's one of the most difficult skills to teach. And what comprehension means is it is understanding and interpreting what is being read. So, to be able to very precisely or accurately understand what is written in the text, children need to have certain basic skills. One is they need to have reasonable amount of reading fluency. They need to decode what they read. They need to make connections between their background knowledge of what they already know about that topic and what they are reading at present. So, an example would be if a child is reading about plants, for example, it helps if the child already knows some information about the plants. So, when they are reading this lesson on plants, they are able to connect whatever previous information they had to what they're reading at present in the text about plants. So, making those connections brings about a deeper understanding and deeper comprehension. And then the one more step, higher level comprehension is when they're able to think deeply about what they have learned, and then they are able to articulate it. They're able to talk about it, or when we ask questions, they're able to answer those questions, or they're able to apply that knowledge that they learned either through writing or through communicating or through actually doing. So, for example, if they've learned about plants, to understand that information and then go and do a project based on it. So, thinking and understanding goes one step deeper. So therefore, when we work with comprehension, too broad, there are other levels also of comprehension. But again, we broadly it can be divided into direct and comprehension and inferential comprehension. Direct comprehension is when they read and understand the information that is directly stated in the text. Okay, it is there present in the text, so even if they don't remember it after reading, they can go back, reread it, and find it out from the text itself because it is clearly mentioned in the text. So, an example for this, if I'm taking a small example, just one sentence. Suppose there's a sentence called, okay, let's say for example, Sam is a little boy who goes to school. Okay, this is just one sentence. The child has read it, and then to direct comprehension would be when you ask questions directly based on it. So, who is Sam? So, Sam is a little boy is already there in the given sentence. So, it's easy to pick that out. Go back, reread it, and pick that out because it is directly mentioned in the text matter. But if you ask something like, is Sam a girl? Now, the word girl doesn't occur anywhere in that sentence, right? So, when you're asking such a question, the child can go back and get confused because the word girl is not mentioned. But the child has, from the sentence, Sam is a little boy who goes to school, the child has to go to another level of comprehension, which is called inferential comprehension, where the child has to realize if Sam is a boy, then Sam cannot be a girl, right? So, if the question is asked, is Sam a girl? Then they have to say, no, Sam is not a girl, or they can say, no, Sam is a boy. Okay, so this is inferential comprehension. Inferential comprehension is, from what they've read, they have to understand an underlying meaning from that text. I've given a very crude example of a sentence, but it is much deeper than that because sometimes when you have little stories or little passages, inferential information is, much more complicated than this. This is just to give you an idea about the difference between direct and inferential comprehension that I've mentioned uh, in just one sentence. Okay, so teaching both is very important, and I am reiterating this because a lot of times, even in the remedial centers, we find that a lot of work is done in direct comprehension, but and once direct comprehension is the child is fairly familiar with it and they are performing it reasonably well, it is assumed that they will do the inferential comprehension by themselves. And a lot of work does not really happen when they are in the remedial centers, or not enough attention is paid to inferential comprehension. So it is very important to understand that in children with SLD, this does not happen automatically. We have to plan activities, and we have to plan instructions which actually work at these kind of skills, because unless you do it and you do it repeatedly and you reinforce those skills repeatedly, it doesn't they don't acquire and maintain these skills throughout. And these skills are very, very important, as they proceed from one grade to the other, as they move up the grade levels in the school, more and more of inferential comprehension will be required. So, coming to a summation of reading and comprehension, one thing is, when you're teaching reading, don't ignore comprehension, and vice versa. They need to go hand in hand. So, even if you're teaching a letter, add a comprehension element to it. So, show them pictures or show them objects which begin with that letter sound. So that adds to the comprehension. And maybe at that stage you may not be writing, but they can even try and make phrases or sentences orally with those words. So you're building a comprehension component into even something as simple as letter recognition. So this is just one example. As you go along, as you get into words, definitely, comprehension, word comprehension, and then it comes to sentence comprehension. And then, of course, it goes into passages and stories and so on. So always remember, reading in isolation is not helpful. Reading and comprehension need to go hand in hand. Your instructional activities should be designed in such a fashion. The skills that promote reading and comprehension, the comprehension skills. Of course, I'm going over this because it's very, very important that these skills are targetedly or explicitly taught to children who have reading difficulties. So decoding skills, that is, the phonemic awareness skills have to be taught. The listening for sounds have to be taught. The phonics rules have to be taught. Phonemic awareness, where they are putting together sounds to read the word, sounding out words, or pulling apart the sounds in a word, and all these things are absolutely necessary. Second thing is, again, work on the reading fluency, which is work on a smooth flow of reading with an even speed and minimizing the errors. Sentence construction and cohesion. While they are reading, expose them to different kinds of sentences, because if they are not exposed to those kind of sentences, when they speak or when they write, they will be very limited in the kind of sentences they produce. So, expose them, make them aware of the different kinds of sentences. you know uh, Something, an example would be, while you're reading a sentence which is a statement, tell them, okay, this begins with a capital letter, it ends with a full stop, this is how you read it. The expression that you give while reading the sentence, again, is important, because that gives an indication of whether the sentence is asking a question, or whether it is telling something, or whether it is expressing some strong emotion. So draw their attention to the sentences, the types of sentences, how it is constructed, how the word order is placed, and so on. The other part is sentence cohesion, and this comes into play especially when there are two or three sentences or a passage and so on. Cohesion means how one sentence is linked to the other to make meaning. So these sentences in a passage are not in isolation. One leads to the other, to the third one, and so on. That's how the matter, or the image, or whatever event is happening in that passage is formed. So understanding the tying up of the different sentences and linking their meanings to get a whole picture. That is very important. So again, when you're teaching, be aware that these kind of again, why I'm saying this is, these linking does not happen automatically with children who have these difficulties. So as educators, it is up to us to help them see those linkages and lead them from one sentence to the other, linking it so as to get a bigger picture. Reasoning and background knowledge. In comprehension, a large part of it is also related to, how much the child already knows about the topic that is being read. So you can have an, if the child doesn't know anything about that topic, maybe you can actually start with a conversation, have a discussion, or ask the child to go over the net and look up something related to that topic and then come to the class. So even before you begin reading, you have activated the knowledge part of it. So then it makes better sense for the child when the child is actually going to go into the printed matter that relates to that topic. So, activating the background knowledge and reasoning out different things based on that topic. Again, these help to enable better reading and comprehension skills. Another key factor when it comes to reading and comprehension is working memory and attention. Attention, it goes without saying that in any task you do, including reading, you have to attend to it. So if the children have attention issues, you have to understand that that will definitely interfere with their reading and comprehension skills, and therefore you have to plan your activities accordingly, depending on their attention span, or getting them more actively engaged. Use activities which will get them more actively engaged and focus on the topic you have at hand. Working memory, that is another thing that children with SLD have difficulty with. Working memory is like, for example, if you've read a small passage or a small story, and then after that you're asked a question. So keeping in mind at least most of the important details of that story and being able to answer offhand. Now these children do have difficulty with these areas. So again, instead of reading a whole passage at one go, you may have to break it up into smaller units and work on the, actually trigger the working memory. So read maybe two sentences or three sentences, get them to answer questions on it. So you've refreshed their memory at that stage, and then go on to the rest of the, another small part of the paragraph. Do it in increments, in staggering parts. So, when you do reading and comprehension, be aware of what are the learning difficulties these children have, which are going to affect their reading and comprehension area. And so, when you know your students well, it is easier for you to plan your instruction and your activities around those areas. So, wherever the deficiencies are or the difficulties are, plug into those areas and plan your activities accordingly. So that kind of brings us to an end of a very, very vast topic, which I've tried to somehow compress into half an hour almost. I hope I haven't overstepped the time. So, again, as I said, very important skill to be taught and one of the most difficult skills to be taught. So, due diligence, effort, and thought process need to go into teaching reading and comprehension skills. So that brings us to an end of this. So we are available for Q&A. Thank you.
Definitely. Before we move on to the Q&A, thank you so much for an amazing session. Few of our participants, as we could read in the chat box, were facing some difficulty in hearing you. To all those participants, I would like to request, if you're attending the next session from the series, maybe you could try connecting and reconnecting your audio device, try increasing your volume, and last of all, please check your internet connection, because we did take a feedback from a lot of other participants and most of them were able to hear our speaker very clearly. So if still you are unable to hear her, please let us know. We will figure out a way to help you better. Okay. Before I move to the questions, Geeta ji, I have something to share with our attendees. If you have been attending Ability webinars, you must be aware of the old resource library that used to look like this. If you already have an Ability account, you could use this library to access the past webinar recordings, but now we have improved the experience further for you, and this will require small amount of effort from you, we have launched this new tool which has more exciting features and lots of resources, including past webinar recordings. So if you want to access this tool, you will need to register for the Ability account, and then you could access all these resources. The link to this page is being shared by our team members in the chat box right now. And also, after the webinar ends, you'll be redirected to this page. So hopefully it helps all of you. What you need to do is click on the login button if you already have an existing Ability account. If not, you can click on the register here button, which you can see just below the login section, and enter a few details. Choose whether you're a professional or a parent or guardian, and then go ahead, register, and access many useful resources from the account. And like we said, our ultimate purpose is only to help you better. You all are at the center of our universe. So accessing and making the resource platform available for you is one of those efforts that we would want to take. Now, moving on to the questions. The first question that we have is from Marikar Santos. What is being asked is, she's a mother of two kids. One is a dyslexic kid, and the other has autism spectrum disorder. So she wanted to understand how to implement different teaching methods for both of our kids. And what she believes and understands is, it is a lot more harder for her to teach her dyslexic daughter because she also has difficulty with retention. So if you could advise something to her.
Um, yeah. SLD and autism are completely two different conditions. But having said that, when you have these children, when I'm talking with strictly with reading and comprehension. When we talk about reading and comprehension, I did talk about phonics and sight word approach, and usually it's a combination of the two that helps with reading. And with most children with SLD, a combination of the two works. With children with autism, by and large, I'm not saying there's no hard and fast rule. There are a lot of children with ASD who do, pick up on phonics very easily. But having said that, I've also seen that many children with autism actually read more, better with the whole word or the sight word approach rather than going with the phonics. Because some of them seem to have almost like a photographic memory. So they kind of tend to take in the whole word approach. Now, one thing to remember is, I think I've said this in my earlier webinars also, there's no right or wrong approach. These are all various approaches. What we are telling you as professionals is what works with most children. But we have to remember that every child is different, every child is unique. What may work with most of them may not work with some of them. So it is up to us to figure out, okay, what is working, and go about different ways of doing it. With retention, again, especially with the child who has dyslexia, uh, when they have SLD, most of the, especially with dyslexia, most of the processing difficulties are seen in the visual auditory processing areas. It is, that is where most of the processing difficulties are, and that's why they have trouble with reading. So introduce the other component. I mean, we talked about the multisensory approach in our earlier webinars. So if the visual area, the auditory area is deficient, then supplement it, complement it using the tactile area and, the kinesthetic area. So use activity oriented learning to help them remember. So use, writing the words in sand, or, making big movements in the air, writing the words in the air, or adding pictorial representations to the word. All these things actually help. So what you have to understand is, if the child is having trouble in one area, use the other area to supplement that deficiency.
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Hope that answers your question, Maricon. And best of luck to you. You are doing a wonderful, wonderful job by raising two wonderful kids. And I hope this answer helps you. Okay, this one is a very interesting question. Fuzia, who has joined us live via Zoom, is asking us if a child has dyslexia, is it limited to a particular language? So, if the child has reading difficulty in English, is it important that it will convert into other languages as well? For example, Hindi or any other language?
See, this is why I said if you understand the definition of SLD or dyslexia, whatever, it is a neurodevelopmental condition, right? So, if it's a neurodevelopmental condition, it is biological, it is within the body. So, it is not language specific usually. So, it will reflect in other areas. But having said that, it may reflect more in the area that the child is unfamiliar with, in the language that the child is unfamiliar with. So, for example, in India, if you go to places where English is not spoken widely, but the child is learning, in an English medium school, then probably it will be more pronounced in the English language area, but still the child will have these issues even in the child's own mother tongue,
Right.
because the problem is intrinsic to the child. So it doesn't matter what language, that will reflect. And see, it is not just the external thing that you see in reading. There are underlying processes. The information processing is has certain glitches, which is what is resulting in those reading difficulties. So because
Sure.
the information processing glitches are there, that will reflect no matter what language you're reading. And this is why in one of the accommodations and modifications we do suggest with children who have dyslexia is drop X, because especially in India, many of most of the states and schools are all bilingual, multilingual. You have the three language system, which makes it doubly difficult for them, because if they have to master two or three languages, learning to read and comprehend in one language itself is difficult. So it compounds the problem when there are different languages.
Sure. That was an interesting fact for me to know, definitely. And I'm sure the attendees watching us and hearing us would benefit greatly from this piece of information. Another question from Anjali, who is one of our attendees today, is asking us if reading impairment is equivalent to dyslexia in terms of diagnosis, or does it imply a lesser or greater degree of severity?
Not all reading difficulties are dyslexia. Because we find if you go to even socioeconomically backward places, or children coming from underprivileged backgrounds, we do have children who have difficulties in learning, or if they come from communities where academic learning, from probably they come from a farming community, or they come from tribal communities where the kind of formal education that we are talking of is not what they're exposed to. So even in those cases, we do find they may have reading difficulties, or they may be a bit backward in reading, because they do not have that in their environment. They're not born and brought up in that kind of an environment. But and it doesn't matter whether the children have dyslexia or don't have dyslexia. So here again, I'm moving away from the diagnostic label of whether they have dyslexia or not. If they have reading difficulties, it doesn't matter whether they have dyslexia or not. You still need to teach those reading skills, or the underlying processes that promote reading skills, in a targeted manner. What you will find is, if they don't have dyslexia, then they tend to the response to that intervention would be faster, and then at some point they tend to outgrow that. But if they are not outgrowing that, and the problem continues to persist in some form or the other, they may improve, but the problem doesn't completely go away. Then that is more indicative of the child having dyslexia.
Right. Interesting. The next question is from Mehza Ahmed. Mehza is asking us if you would recommend group dyslexia management, and if yes, how big the group should be. Also, her second question is what would be your advice to differentiate between intellectual disability and dyslexia? to differentiate between kids with intellectual disability and dyslexia?
Okay. Can you just repeat the first part of the question, please?
Right. Meza is asking if would you recommend managing kids with
Okay.
dyslexia in a
Okay.
group, and if you do
Yeah.
recommend, how big the group should be?
Uh, it depends on, the each child. Some children may have mild to moderate difficulties. It depends on who the remedial educator is. Some people can manage 3 to 5 kids in a group, but even in that, if you have one child who has a very severe problem, then that child may need one-on-one attention. So it depends on who the children are in the group rather than the number and what their level of severity is. So it is fine. I mean, I've done sessions where, and it depends on how you do the sessions. So when we say group sessions, in a group session, you can have 4 5 activities. Some activities can be done together, whereas some activities you can do it individually or in maybe twos. Even in a group of 8, you can divide them into twos. Okay, and you can
Right.
differentiate your instruction in that way. So there are different ways of doing it. So it's not like, okay, you have 5 or 10 kids and you're teaching them all together at the same time. Even within that together at the same time, you can differentiate. So
Right.
there's no
Right.
hard and fast rule. But again, when they are coming for clinical remediation, usually we try and do it individually. At the most, I would prefer three in a group, because quite often we find their levels are very varied. If you are able to group reasonably similar level kids at one group, yeah, that might work. But again, you'll have issues like, one child may have attention issues, another child may not have attention issues, so you'll have to cater to all those. So
Right.
again, there's no hard and fast rule. It depends on what works and what the educator can handle. If I
Right.
was doing the same thing early on, I wouldn't have been able to, early part of my career, I was doing mostly individually or maybe 2 kids or 3 kids. But now, if you ask me, if they are pretty much homogeneous, even 7 to 8 is possible. But again, it depends on who the children are, what their level of severity is, what is the level of attention, how independently can they work when you set tasks. Because when you do differentiated work also, when you're in a group of 8, if you're moving to two to targeting two at a time, then the others cannot just sit idly. You'll have to keep them occupied, and they have to be able to do those tasks reasonably independently, so that you can focus on the two and then rotate, then move on to the other two people in the group, and so on. So if the educator needs to do that on a rotation basis, these things do work. There are different kinds of strategies that you can do. It depends on how well equipped as an educator we are, the kind of experience we have, and of course, the challenges and strengths of the children in the group.
Right. Right. Yeah, so it all depends on the educator. Hope that helps you a little, Meza. Moving on, the next question we have from Tejasvi. Tejasvi seems to be an educator, and what she's saying is, let's say if she has given standards for a specific grade level that the children should achieve by the end of term or year. Now, a child with dyslexia can initially work with different challenging goals to achieve progress. So, in that case, should a teacher aim to get them reach to the standardized goals by the end of year? Or if not, how does one balance between, these goals for children with dyslexia, which are challenging, and the standardized goals?
Very difficult proposition. Yeah, this is always a conflict in the schools, because schools have their own grade level expectations, and some of the children don't really match up to it. Now, what we try and do is we have to give remedial skills training. So that can be done either in a pull-out session or in clinical remediations and so on, and also within the classroom if necessary. Keep in mind what goals are set by the school for that grade level. See which areas probably the child can reach up to. Maybe not all the areas, but maybe some of the areas can be reached up. For example, if there, now this is a very classic example, if there is a comprehension exercise, and the child has reasonably good language skills, but the problem is with reading. Okay, the child's reading level may be low, but the child's vocabulary and understanding of the English language may be good. So in place of that, so you can do a, you can give, here is where accommodations and modifications help. So then instead of give, if the exercise is on how well the child comprehends, you don't have to make the child read and then comprehend. You can probably play it on tape. The child can listen to the audio recording or use the text to speech to to do the reading part of it. By listening, the child can comprehend and answer the questions. So you can do different ways of how to meet the standards. Sometimes maybe most children with dyslexia also have difficulties with writing. It spills over into the writing area as well. So instead of writing, say, long answers, maybe it is long answers for the other children, but for this child, there will be issues with writing out, spelling out, and everything. Because reading difficulty spills over to all these areas. So maybe you can give one word answers. You can accept one word answers. If the key answer is correct, you can grade on that. So it depends on how you can match the child's level to the expected grade level expectations, and whether some modifications and accommodations can be put in place to help the child achieve that.
Right. Right. Hope that helps you, Tejasvi. This is a question which most of the educators struggle with. And let's hope that you are able to do justice with all the kids. Okay, the next question is from Bharati. Bharati is saying that her son is able to recognize the letters, but the son is struggling to read the words. So, is that a sign of dyslexia or it is some other kind of reading difficulty?
Usually, it is an indicator. We cannot say for sure unless the child is properly assessed. So it's very early stages, and as I said, we do not, as we mentioned in the earlier webinars, we do not diagnose dyslexia until they are in grade 3 or age 8. Especially in India, we have strict regulations for that. So if you find, it doesn't matter whether the child has dyslexia or doesn't have, or whether it's diagnosed or not diagnosed, what what you have to focus on is, okay, your child understands the letters, recognizes letters, but is unable to blend together and read it in words. So here you have to look at what skills are the child having difficulty with. Maybe the child recognizes the alphabet names, because in English the alphabet name and the sound differs, right? You say B for the letter B, but the sound is B. Okay, so there may be a confusion. In some schools, they do not necessarily teach the phonic part of it. They may just teach it as B and then expect the child to convert it into the sound while reading. And this does not automatically happen with with children who are not natural readers or who do struggle with reading. So it has to be remembered that these phonological processes, or these phonemic awareness things that I talked about, the training in phonics, whether that is happening or not. If that is not happening, then it needs to be included in your instruction and see whether the child is catching on. If the child is still struggling, the child, and then, if you still find the child is not catching on and is still struggling, then probably you need to go in for an assessment. But again, not all, blending sounds into words, again, it may be because it hasn't been made apparent to the child.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they always end up with dyslexia. There are some children, it's like how I may be a very language flared person, so if I have a flair for languages, I pick up languages easily, but I may not have that knack for maths. Among the so-called regular population also, some people grasp math concepts very easily, anything which is logical, analytical, but they don't catch up on language very easily. It is something similar to that. If this child may not be a child who switches on to catches language easily. So the nuances of the language and how to read the words have to be targetedly taught. And some of the children, we do find it, they are targetedly taught these things, then they catch up and they move on. So if they do move on and they do manage, then it means, even without testing, okay, the child doesn't have dyslexia. It's just that they were not a very language oriented person, but once it was made apparent to them, they could catch on and move on. What happens, see, when you say a disorder, the disorder is established when it persists, when you've given intervention, when you've targeted it, given the right kind of instruction and all that, and still the problem still remains. The
Right.
persistence of the problem is very, very important in a diagnostic, diagnosis being made.
Totally. Hope that answers your question, Bharti. So, yeah, we cannot say anything, but while it is an indicator, it is good and advisable to consult a professional, but only after the child has is of certain age, like Geeta ji specified. We will have or take the last two questions for today's session because we are running short of time. And so quickly, I'll move on to the next question, which is from Redenta F. Santos. Redenta is asking us if you could point her to any recent study on effective technique for addressing reading and comprehension difficulties. If there is a recent study and you could mention about it.
Reading and comprehension has been intensively researched. I mean, if I could think of one study, there isn't one study. There's plenty of stuff out there. And, if you just Google reading and comprehension, there's plenty of studies which will give you varying kind of data on what contributes to better reading comprehension abilities. And even in the case nowadays, even neurosciences have come into this area where they're actually mapping the brain activity, in children with dyslexia and those without dyslexia, and then giving intervention and seeing what difference does it make to their brain activity when certain kinds of activities are done to promote their reading skills, and how it affects their ultimate reading progress. So these kind of things are always there. I can't, if you ask me off my head, my memory is really poor, so I can't really relate one study. But there are plenty of studies that out there which talk about, how certain strategies work better or certain other strategies don't work, and so on. And even on YouTube, if you actually look in for reading comprehension activities, there are plenty of materials that come out there. There are a lot of nice videos also with actual classroom instruction in practice, which people can access. You just have to decide what area you want to look into, if you what grade level you want to look into, and Google it, and there'll be plenty of stuff out there on the net.
Totally. Internet is the best teacher, like they say, no? There's everything out there, anything and everything you need. Okay, so moving to the last question for today's session. This is from Chiranjeevi Kottam. Chiranjeevi is saying that how do primary reflexes affect dyslexia, or do they get affected by it?
As I mentioned just now, nowadays a lot of neuroscience development research has come into, dyslexia and similar kind of disorders. And initially, there was this thing that because primary reflexes are reflexes that an infant is born with. It is already there. It develops when the child is in the womb of the mother, and some of these are present at birth. Some of them appear later on, usually within the first year of, from 0 to 1 year of age. Some of the reflexes appear at a certain time, within that 0 to 1 years time, and they disappear at a certain time. So, in as part of normal child development, the appearance and disappearance of reflexes happen. Now, in children with disorders or disabilities, what happens is some of these reflexes may not appear at the right time, or even if they appear at the right time, they may not disappear at the right time. See, the timing is very important. The way, I don't know, the creation has made child development is, in certain times when it should appear, it appears for a reason. It appears so that certain developments can take place. It disappears so that certain other developments can take place. So if they don't appear and disappear at the right time, obviously it disrupts the normal development pattern. And nowadays, recent studies have shown, although dyslexia, as I said, it's not diagnosed until they actually start having difficulties with reading. Uh, a lot of neuroscience research is now showing that there is some connection between some of the reflexes and dyslexia. And one of the reflexes they do mention is ATNR. ATNR is asymmetric tonic neck reflex, which usually ATNR appears when the child is about 3 to 4 months of age, and it disappears by the time the child is about 6 to 7 months of age. So what happens when ATNR appears is it facilitates a very important skill called visuomotor, looking towards the object and being able to go, when you look at an object, your hand extends to that side so that you can grasp the object. So that's a very important skill in the child development thing. So when that reflex appears, it facilitates that. But by 6 to 7 months, this should disappear, because if that doesn't happen, it impedes the further development, which is the other side development. So when it is ATNR, it is usually where you're looking, you can use your hands. But after some time, that should disappear, because then you should be able to use both hands at the same time. Okay, so if it doesn't disappear, then that bilateral or both side usage gets hampered. Now, recent studies have been showing that if, in some children where ATNR disappearance doesn't happen, if it persists, then this bilateral or the both sides of the body, the right and left side, which is again indicative of the right brain and left brain connections and those information processing happening smoothly, is affected. And if that is affected, they are saying there are some linkages, again, not in all the cases, but in some percentage of cases that is being linked to dyslexia later on. Although, again, disappearance of ATNR and all is a very, very, and in children with SLD, I mean, with other disabilities, it may be more pronounced. With intellectual disability or, cerebral palsy and all that, that is more pronounced. It's very visible. In children who may develop SLD later on, this is not that visible or tangible. So it gets missed in those stages. Okay.
Right.
So what happens is one key indicator, but what can happen is, again, it is not very well established. Some studies confirm it, some studies do not confirm it, is, when crawling is missed. What happens in crawling is, all both sides of the hands, arms, and the legs have to go work in unison, right? It has to alternate, and when they're moving on all fours. So that is a very high level of bilateral integration.
Right.
Both sides of the brain working well in coordination, in sync, in a certain targeted manner. Now, if crawling is missed, it may be an indicator of some bilateral integration issues later on. And so, many children with dyslexia, we do see that some of them do display bilateral integration when we assess them even later on. And many of them, I did mention about nonverbal LD when we talked about the introduction webinar, where balance, motor coordination, these kind of things, minor things which are not very visible but are there in these children. And these are also linked with reading difficulties and so on. So the thing is, do a lot of games, sport activities, art and craft activities, dance and movement activities. Do things where there are crossing over exercises, drills. All these things promote better bilateral integration, and ultimately all this leads to sensory integration. So whether it is there is a problem or not, if you do these things, automatically it does promote better underlying processes that are necessary for reading, writing, and math and whatever. So
Wonderful.
so it is very, very
That's
connected. We don't see the connections, but it is very connected. So this is why schools, educators, even parents should make a demand that a lot more of PT, music, yoga, and all these things should be part of regular curriculum. It is not that academics should just be the focus, whereas the others are like extracurricular. They shouldn't be extra or co-curricular. They should be part of the main curriculum, because they all
Totally.
ultimately feed into the so-called academics.
Totally. I hope you're listening, dear educators in the gathering, and all parents. Make your child play, hear music, dance, and all those things would eventually and ultimately lead in improving their academics. So that's a wonderful, wonderful takeaway that we most of the people are taking from this session. Apart from, of course, the very useful advices and knowledge sharing that happened today, that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Geeta ji, for joining us once again. There are two more webinars pending in this series, and we will see you at every Thursday, 4:30 p.m. for do join us for the next two webinars from the series. And of course, if you haven't filled the feedback, please do click on the link to share your feedback with us. It will help us to improve further and to improve the experience for you all further. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Geeta ji.
Thank you. And, beautifully drafted questions from a lot of the participants. So they're really intently listening. And that's really nice to have a great audience. And thank you, Ability, for the wonderful platform. Looking forward to the other two webinars as well. Thank you.
Totally. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.